Come hang out with me while I paint some camping ghosts in a spooky, foggy forest. On my loose sketch here, I've mapped out a horizon line and some points that converge into a triangle to guide where I want to paint my trees. This isn't true perspective per se, but somewhere along the lines of atmospheric perspective, in that it provides an interesting shape to the composition, guides where the trees disappear up into the fog, and provides an illusion of depth by varying the sizes and values of the trees. So I have some Paul Rubens watercolor, and I'm only going to work in two colors here. I'm going to work in a green, kind of a foresty green, and then I'm going to use black to add to the shade of green as I work with it. So you can see that I'm starting with just adding some like pure forest green from my tin and into my ceramic well. I'm going to try to make it as concentrated as I can to start. So to make it less concentrated, I add my brush to my water and just pick up some water on that brush. That way, whatever pigment's still on the brush is going to transfer into this next well. So you can see that it's still dark, but less dark than the original well. If I want to make that even lighter, I'm going to dip my brush in the water one more time and add what's left of that pigment and that water to the third well. And you may have heard this term before in watercolor, is like the coffee and tea. So you have different consistencies of that green by having more or less water. So now I want to adjust the shade of the greens in my ceramic wells by adding some black. So I have some black in the center there, and I'm going to just kind of adjust the kind of value of those blacks too, because I don't want to add maybe pure black to, you know, the middle grade of the green there. So now I'm going to add some color to the paper and try to get the paper to behave and get the paint to behave in a way that I can convey this spooky, foggy background. So I start from the outside. I'm working above the horizon line that I created for this piece. I'm trying to keep that center part kind of light. So I'm moving paint over into the center, and then I'm going to take my water bottle, which is always good to have handy, and I'm just going to spritz it with water. And it's a lot of water. These papers are 100% cotton, but they're not anything super expensive like your arches or anything like that. I got these off Amazon. They're really small for practice work, and I will put in the description the paper that this is and where I got it. I'm continuing to add more pigment, and I have a lot of water on my brush right now because I don't want a lot of streaking or a lot of like bleeding or anything like that. I really just want to keep the color as consistent as possible, and I want it to be able to move around on the paper. So you can see as I spritz it with more water, it's getting pretty waterlogged here. But I'm going to keep at it. I have faith in my paper. It's going to see this through to the end. I've gotten it so wet that I've kind of bleeded below my horizon line, but that's okay. I'm just going to take a dry paper towel and I'm just going to blot that away and keep that white space where I want it. And I'll do that in the center above the horizon line too, because like I said, I want that center to be more white where there might be light, and then the outsides be more dark. So I'm adding yet even more water because now I've, blotted that dry in the center with the paper towel, and I just want the water and the pigment to just spread all the way across the top of that paper, and I don't want it to look like there's any harsh lines or anything like that. I'm adding a little more dark to the outside here because I know that this is going to dry super duper light, and you'll see how light it will dry. So I'm trying to at least add a little bit more dimension in that first layer of color. So now you can see that this is dried, and I don't know if you noticed, but that paper was looking pretty warped in that first pass because I added so much water to it. But if you look at it now, it doesn't look so bad. I've got it taped down and I've let it dry for a fair amount of time, so it's looking pretty good to me. And these kinds of papers are always going to have a little bit of warping, but there's definitely means and ways to address that issue. So don't let that scare you from, using water on your paper. Now I'm just creating some outlines for my spooky ghost. I kind of want to hold off on making any adjustments to that top just yet. So I'm just adding a little bit of shadows and like making sure that the ghosts, as they're facing the fire, still have that highlight of white so you can tell that the light is coming from that direction. I'm taking an online course right now, and I'll probably talk about it in another video because I definitely want to do some comparisons and contrasts between different artists, perspectives on how they create scenes like this. And one of the things that came up is that, you give this illusion of shadow, but it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect all the time. If you give a general sense of where the light is coming from, sometimes that's just good enough and you're fine in that regard. But just be mindful of light sources and making sure that you've got good shadows and good light spaces to reflect that. I get a little nervous using this tiny, tiny brush and doing these tiny, tiny details. But since I got this set of these really tiny brushes, I've been having a lot of fun putting in those fine details in. I think that as my art progresses, I'll get more comfortable putting in fine details in my work. You can't forget that they're roasting the little marshmallows. So with the fire, kind of a similar concept. I'm making sure that the center of the fire is going to be the whitest part, and then the exterior of the fire is going to be a little bit darker. And I'll do, again, just like 3 different values to demonstrate the edges of the fire. I'm lifting up just a little bit of that pigment with my brush just to lighten that up. I know this is going to dry super light, and I'm okay with that. So now I'm starting to work on the trees. And as you noticed in my sketch, I really didn't have any branches. I just had the lines. And this is the kind of thing where it's kind of fun to leave it up to your imagination. It might be scary at first, but just kind of start adding branches where you feel like it. We're thinking about the light, and I have it darker at the top, the tree, and as I come down, I'm going to start lighting that up by using some of the lighter consistency green that I have so that you can tell that there is light on the trees. As I put in some of those background trees, I'm going to make sure that those are going to be super duper light as opposed to the trees in the foreground. And you'll see I'll do some more layering of dark color over those foreground trees just to make sure that there's plenty of contrast between the ones in the front and the ones that are receding towards the back. Now I should be able to add some green on the ground because there's not going to be any bleeding between the bottom and the top of my paper. That top should have dried enough to where it's going to put like a nice definition between the ground and the sky there. So I'm adding the green to the ground and I'm starting around the edges and I'm leaving a circle of white around the ghost because, again, I want to focus on there being a bright light from the fire there. It's going to be a little bit more harsh than when we did the sky with that foggy background because I want that light to be very, very evident here on the ground. And I just like to go in while I'm waiting for this water to dry and just start adding like fine details to things if I can. I'm so impatient when it comes to letting my water dry. And I'm really trying to be patient with this one because I want the edges to be really defined and not show a lot of bleed that's not intended anywhere on the painting. So because I'm still waiting for the ground to dry, I've decided to add some bushes. So it's a great addition to this foggy forest. So I start really light and just do kind of like little light dabs of green where I think some bushes should go. And then later on, I can add a darker value, more of the coffee consistency to the front of that to add some dimension to the bushes as well. If you go camping and you've been in the spooky woods before, you know those trees can sometimes cast really long, spooky shadows. So even though I was like not entirely sure I recall how the shadows would go in terms of the direction of the light, I think I did okay. So if, I'm trying to see where the light is coming from on the tree and where the shadow would cast behind the tree. So hopefully that was effective. I think it definitely adds to the spookiness of those looming trees there. Just a little side story while we watch Cozy Painting. My downstairs neighbors' kids have already started painting like little ghost ornaments and Halloween stuff. I'm so excited because as soon as like July was over, I was ready to start painting spooky stuff. So I'm definitely one of those people that likes to start celebrating early. Hopefully you're one of those people too, because I'm definitely making a little series here of spooky little paintings. And I feel like this is just the time of year where I get so creative. I get so in the zone and I just want to make all the way until the holidays are over. So expect lots of fun holiday stuff from me. So I'm just adding in some of those fine details. As you can see, I want to show some of the graininess of the wood. I want to add some dimension to the trees, add to the shading. And then I'm going to come in and once those bushes that I put in are dry, I'm going to put in a darker value of that green in front of it just to show some depth there. I let my paper dry and I'm going to go in and I'm going to start adding another layer to that sky. I'm super proud of myself for letting this whole thing dry completely. It's not my strong suit, but I was really enjoying how well this painting was coming out. I really love the spooky forest and the cute little ghosts, so I wanted to be patient and give it the time it needed to dry completely. So I know that I want there to be a more contrast in the foggy sky, so I'm adding more color and wetting my paper and just kind of adding a darker value of that green, or the darker shade of the green, because we've got added black to that as well. And I'm just deepening up those edges there. Again, I'm going to spritz it with water because I want the water to flow across the paper. I want to be able to have everything blend in such a way that it's going to look very foggy. I don't want a lot of harsh lines. Don't be afraid to go super, super dark, probably even darker than I did if you decide to do this yourself, because this paint dries really, really light. And it's one of those things that you'd think I would have gotten the hang of yet in terms of, being bold with how much pigment I'm putting on there and how dark I'm making it. But I'm still finding it difficult to just keep adding and adding and adding, especially when I have paper that I'm not entirely confident in. Although this one's fighting for its life, it's hanging in there. I will say, and you'll probably learn in other videos, that layering paint on it, it'll start to get kind of scratchy, and once you've added too much layers to it. So that's the thing I get a little nervous about. Sometimes paper gets super scratchy. I don't know how to explain it any other way when you're trying to add more layers to it, and then I'm like, ugh, I don't like it. It's hopefully there won't be an ASMR video of that sound. Now that paper's super, super wet again, I'm going to lift this painting up. I'm going to take it off. I'm trying to leave as much of the tape on as I can because I don't want those edges to bleed. I have some nice crisp white edges on this, and so I'm trying to avoid that. But I want to now lift the paper and start moving it around and have that pigment just kind of bleed into the center, so I get that really nice foggy effect still. So this is what it looks like when it's dry, and you can see that the paper is warped somewhat, but it's not too bad. You could put this in a frame, it'll be nice and flat. You could put some books on it for a few days, and it should flatten out really nicely. There's definitely different ways and means to flatten out even the peskiest of warped paintings. So don't feel like you need to break the bank on super expensive watercolor pads or, super heavyweight watercolor paper if that's all you've got. But 100% cotton, I will say, was super absorbent and super, helpful in this project. You can see how light the edges dry, but I've got some nice dark edges there, but the fogginess and the lightness in the center, those crisp edges here around the fire look really nice to me. Overall, I can see some definition in the shadows. I can see the trees getting darker at the top and lighter at the bottom. You might ask me why I didn't put leaves on these trees. A, it's spookier. B, I tried that. I didn't like it. So I left the leaves off the trees. If you want to switch it up and add some leaves to your forest, that's totally fine. I love it just the way it is. So let me know in the comments what you think. Was this helpful? It's a nice little value study. You get a little perspective and you get some light study. So I'm 3 for 3 on fundamentals today. Let me know what you think. Are you going to try this yourself? Let me know in the comments. And with that, I'll say goodbye for now. Bye-bye.